Hello, I'm your host, Dom the Big D, aka Scum with Boundaries, and I want to ask you, have you ever wondered what would Mad Max be like if it was made by Russians? Me neither, to be honest, but that is what Hard Rock Apocalypse is. Having finished playing that game on my channel, I thought I could come up with a review for this game, even if it's a bit late for it to be even remotely relevant, because I really think this game deserves attention. Sure, it's not in the list of the best games I've ever played, but it sure does some interesting things I'd like to see more of in gaming industry, but only if they're done well. By the way, this is going to be more like a review of a series rather than a single game, because I also want to say some things about the sequel to Hard Rock Apocalypse called Rise of Clans. But let's do it chronologically, shall we? Well, then I should start with how I even got around to play this game. I've never heard anything about the game until my friend gave me a copy of Rise of Clans. I was highly skeptical at the time, because I tend not to trust my friend's taste. Sorry if you're watching, dude, it is how it is. But having zero expectations, I was pleasantly surprised by the game. I'd say there's some beauty in delving into a game having absolutely no knowledge about it. Yet, I haven't finished the game because I got stuck a couple of times, dropped the game, and forgotten about it. I'm not even sure if my friend has completed the game to this day, because he was telling me stories about how he got stuck as well. Anyway, sometime later, I found a copy of original Hard Rock Apocalypse at some crappy counter-site store, so, already having some sentiments for the series, I bought it without thinking. It was my birthday anyway. I played the game, and could definitely tell that it was quite better than its sequel, but for some reason I stopped playing it as well and didn't finish it until I was stuck in a hospital a couple years later without internet connection and a laptop that didn't have any better games installed, not that it could run them. First off, I could talk about the story, because there's least to talk about here. The story in this game is really poor. There are some errors in translation. Some things don't make much sense, and those that do are very cliched. I'll summarize the plot so you'd understand what's going on in the game better. There will be some spoilers, but I doubt that you're watching this video without having played the game yourself or watched my playthrough. First thing in the intro, we see some object from the sky dropping on some Middle Eastern looking town, but it isn't clear what it is exactly. My thoughts were it was either a nuke or a meteorite. After the explosion, we see some Mad Max style car chase, accompanied by some cheesy rock and roll during that scene. And during that scene we're introduced to someone who looks like the main character. I thought it was the main character for a while actually, until I figured out that it was Ivan Go, the missing father of the main character that we're looking for throughout the whole game. The actual protagonist is a young farmer who just got old enough to drive. He had to help his foster father, who didn't tell that he wasn't the real father, with some daily errands. On the way to town, we meet Alice, a mysterious woman who asks for help. You can either accept or decline her quest, and it is now made clear in the game that it is the game's biggest choice which determines the whole story. And yes, there are two whole separate storylines right from the beginning of the game, and the player isn't even aware that he chose one story over another. Alice's plea for help doesn't even sound important. I'll notice this because in my Let's Play series I saw some things I never did before and didn't even need to go to some places or do some quests that I needed to do in my previous playthrough. While in some ways this is really impressive, I couldn't name many other games that have a couple of completely different stories. It is done in a terrible way, and the player can be even put off if he accidentally chooses the worst story. But whichever path you choose, you go through the same zones that include Eastern European looking lands, not France, not Scotland, jungle, and desert, and fight the same enemies. If you choose to help your foster father instead of Alice, you get arguably the better story that focuses more on the search of Ivanhoe and protagonist's personal goals. Whereas, if you side with Alice, you do not uncover as much truth about your real father and kill a whole bunch of dudes just because they cross your path or someone told you to. In any scenario, the ending feels very rushed and disappointing. But at least I won't spoil that. The only thing about the ending worth mentioning is that there are actually two endings that are not determined by a choice in the beginning of the game or any other choices during the game. It all depends on a single dialogue choice. And again, it's never made clear that you're choosing something over something else. If you end up that far into the game, I'd say it's worth to play through both of the endings, since they explain some things about each other, while on their own, they're pretty weak. Okay, I finished the story, now on to the gameplay. I can't say it's good as well, but it's interesting nevertheless. At first it wasn't easy to figure out what game it was even. Driving game? Third-person shooter? Russian road simulator? Hard Rock Apocalypse includes some aspects from all these genres, but it's a pure RPG at its core. And you don't often see RPGs where you drive a vehicle. Hell, there are very few games with vehicular combat in general, and I do enjoy that sort of thing. I'm never good at driving games, so I enjoy ramming some poor idiots full speed and watching them explode. And it's fun that you can not only buy new trucks, but also upgrade them and install new weapons. You also need to constantly repair and refuel your war machine, but it would be nice to have more customization. The combat isn't all that satisfying. Boss fights are outright terrible, and random bandits often seem to appear out of nowhere. And sometimes their spawn rates are so high that you're either pinned in the town or don't bother fighting them at all. They will have a hard time catching you if you try to escape with their poor AI. About running away. There is insane amount of invisible walls in this game, and often, even if you are able to climb some mountain with your truck, the game prevents you to because it wants you to be somewhere else. That's highly annoying, especially because most of the game is driving from point A to point B, and it's natural for someone to try make some shortcuts. Some of these travels even make you go through the whole game's map and back in some fetch quest. It feels like it's done just to stretch the game's length, but I think it is possible to go through the whole map without even refueling, so that's just not a wasted mechanic. It's nice that it's there, but I never had to worry about running out of fuel and planning my routes strategically to survive in such harsh world. Even if you do need to repair and refuel, you are rarely short on money due to random enemies dropping loads of cash, especially later in the game. The economy is completely broken in this game. You might struggle with money in the beginning, but later you can easily become filthy rich. That may sound good at first, but the high amounts of loot make side quests completely worthless. These missions don't have any stories to offer like in some other games, and the rewards are laughable when you compare how much money you can earn from enemies in the same time that it takes to complete a quest. The game isn't even good in technical way. It might be troublesome to get the game running on a modern system, but it's doable. Though you might need to look up some Russian troubleshooting guides you can barely understand. For me, it was even more difficult, because the game wasn't exactly friendly with any recording software that I tried. I ended up modifying some configuration files to get the game running in windowed mode and decent resolution. Even then, recording was pain in the ass, but after making the game run in windowed mode, I encountered some bugs I never did before. Some translations were completely broken, and I started encountering some Russian text. That ain't exactly good when the game is full of bugs as it is. At least one thing in this game is really good. It's the soundtrack. Yes, it may get a bit repetitive, some tracks aren't the best, but the rest of them are joy to listen to. You are hearing them right now, in the background. Exploration themes are nice and peaceful. I could listen to them for hours. Fight themes are also very appropriate for the game, and town themes make me feel like I'm in a bar from some old film or cartoon. Plus, the military town theme is badass. It was a real joy for me to hear it for the first time. The only thing that I find a bit weird is that these soundtracks hold some hard to grasp nostalgic vibe. I know, the game isn't exactly new, but the soundtrack sounds like something from 90s to me. I'm not sure if this is because the game is made in Russia, where some things seem to be stuck in time, the devs had a lower budget, or is it done purposefully to capture how humanity rolled downhill and civilization went centuries back, which is least likely? I don't have anything against that sound, but I can't help but wonder why it sounds like that. The composer might have been something to do with that, because I managed to track him down and found out that he doesn't even make rock music. I made the conclusion that I despise his other songs. They don't sound good at all. They're not at all similar to the ones in game. And since he doesn't play rock himself, his perception of rock music might have been made of cliché songs from the 70s. After digging around the game files, I found a song that I haven't heard in the game. But judging from the vocals and overall sound, it was made by a completely different band, and I couldn't find any information about it. So, if you happen to know what this band is, please do let me know. All in all, I'd say Hard Rock Apocalypse is a decent game. It's not everyone's cup of tea, but those who can look past its dated graphics, bugginess and writing flaws might find some enjoyment in it. I'd call it one of the best bad games. And don't get me wrong, a good bad game is a lot better than a bad good game in my eyes. Now on to Hard Rock Apocalypse Rise of Clans. It is officially called an add-on to original game, but I disagree with that term. It sounds like some DLC, and those didn't even exist back in the day. Plus, Rise of Clans was released in separate CDs and is a standalone game altogether. It's like Blood Dragon to Far Cry 3. It uses the same engine and mechanics, yet still is its own thing. What I'd call it is a good old standalone expansion. Let me say that again. Expansion. Man, I miss the term. It actually meant that you could push some more out of your favorite game instead of cheap cash grab tactic, which is DLC. As mentioned, Rise of Clans is a standalone game which runs on the same engine, it reuses a lot of the same models, but has brand new world, story, and expands on some mechanics. It follows the story of Vagrant, who is trying to travel to Edmonton, La Canada, in search of better life, but ends up as an errand boy for a local clan leader. That's pretty much it. The game is considerably shorter, but in this case it is not necessarily bad. It is fun playing around with new trucks and guns. New perk system adds an extra edge to customization. You get perks for certain deeds in the game and they even act different depending on how you paint your truck. And yes, there are a lot more painting options that include different emblems, patterns and color palettes. It's a shame though that there were only 2 patterns and you cannot unlock any more of them. There are also more quests where you have to get out of your own truck that are really effective. Another thing added in the game is multiplayer mode. I never got to try it out since no one plays the game, but I'm pretty sure that it's just your standard deathmatch and capture the flag stuff, just with war trucks. Basically the bones for Tar Gem's new game Crossout. It's still a nice addition. Another thing I found interesting about the expansion is that it managed to make side quests not completely worthless. Yes, economy is still broken, even more so than in the first game, but there's something else. When you finish the game you get a pop-up message saying how many books you've collected throughout the game. I never really cared about them since I wasn't sure on how to get them or where to use them, but apparently you get them from side quests, and if you collect all of them, you unlock a secret level. I've made a whole video just about it, you can watch it and decide for yourself if the level is worth the effort or not. And for the end, I'd like to discuss if the game is worth a sequel or not. In short, I think it would be truly interesting to see another Hard Rock Apocalypse game in the future, and I wouldn't say that about many other games of this budget. Right now Hard Rock Apocalypse feels like a game equivalent of a B-movie. I was looking for a fitting term but I couldn't find any, so let's call it a B-game. It's just like a B-movie, it didn't have a huge budget and tried to appeal to as wide of an audience as possible and make some profit. I don't know if this game made a lot of money, I really doubt it, but it so happens that even if it is mainly bad, it has some charm to it. I think if Tar Gem managed to get a higher budget, something really interesting could be made out of this series. The only thing left now is to hope that Crossout, the new game from Tar Gem, is successful and makes the company some money. They already have the bones for a new game with their new engine. Vehicle customization and combat in Crossout are really satisfying. Imagine if they incorporated that into an open world RPG. And they could really use a bit of writing. If Tar Gem plays their cards right, the future seems to be bright. Otherwise, I wouldn't want another B game. I think I need some gimmick to make my review stand out a little bit. I know. Since I'm as much of a music nerd as I am a video game nerd, I could provide you with a fitting album that fits the game. In this case, I had some trouble finding a fitting album for Hard Rock Apocalypse. At first I thought some heavy rock and roll band like Motorhead would be appropriate, but that would be the case for many driving games. And the thing from this game soundtrack that captured me is its dreaminess, old school rock vibe, a little flat mastering, and for that I chose Deconstruction's self-titled album, since many grunge rock albums would fit the game, but this one is rather underrated one in my opinion. I just like the game. It fits the game with melancholic undertones and catchy rock melodies. Deconstruction as a band is most famous for its bass player and vocalist Eric Avery, who previously played in Jane's Addiction. If you haven't liked Deconstruction, I can highly recommend Eric's solo albums too, but I warn you, they're a bit more experimental. And that's it, folks. What do you think of Hard Rock Apocalypse? And do you think it deserves a sequel? Leave your opinion in the comment section. I've been your host, Dom the Big D. Thanks for watching.